I was unfortunately not here last time because I was having a class. But I just got a chance to read through Kevin's fantastic summary of what happened during last meeting. So it seems like we still want to discuss the demographic part of the survey.
Hmm.
It seems like we've already got through age, education status, sex, gender identity, but we do want to discuss more about sexual orientation. And Rowan and Adaya will ask to contact about Native American orientation. Is there any answer feedback update about that?
Okay. So I think I think we should add two-spirit to gender. I don't think we need to add it to sexual orientation. I think that was one of the ones I think the gender was kind of the sticking point there. And I think the question is really, do we want one or two questions for gender? Because it's fairly common to have one that asks, how do you identify your gender? And then do you identify as transgender? Fortunately, we have Rudy Ann this morning with us, who is our DEI person at HEC. And Rudy Ann, I would love to have you weigh in on how HEC has been if HEC has any recommendations for handling the options for gender.
Good morning, everybody. Hi. So as always, my head always defaults to, of course, what our R&D department uses. So just note on process, they are very good about updating the use of the different demographics as they evolve and connecting with institutions and aligning best as can to that. On that note, though, we connect to the student success work and on the advisory groups that exist for each student demographic, and there is a new LGBTQ plus 2IS a two-spirit group now that helps to create direction on how to support students in our state all the way through post-secondary education and training. And so they also use two-spirit in that. And so aligning or staying aligned to continued work in that is the recommendation I would make, without, of course, overcomplicating the whole survey by adding 10 million more details, to cover certain things, right? And so I think it's just finding definitely the representation within that, at the same time helping to make sure that the user, the participant, can get through it meaningfully. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Would it help if I shared my screen to kind of show you where we're at and what the options are? Okay, let me go ahead and do that and see if I can get the right one up. I think this is it. Is that okay? I need to know. Let me see if I can figure out what you guys are seeing. There we go. Okay. So right now we have for sex gender identity, we have, do you identify your gender as? And we do have the option of making that select as many as apply, or we could just have it and then it would be one question, although that makes analysis more tricky. I think one of the reasons that it gets broken down, and then I wanted to put this in from the 2015 transgender survey, because I think they were working with a specific population. This was not a survey that went out to people who identified themselves as cishet, but they did have a few different options. So I am not sure if there's, and I honestly, I really feel like we need to run this through folks who are in the transgender community, recognizing that there's probably more than one option, but I don't know if folks have, if there are maybe campus groups that people would feel comfortable saying, hey, we're trying to figure out how to make sure that the most people possible feel included in these options. How would you like us to ask about your gender? I think I would really feel most comfortable with that. Does anyone have any groups that they feel like they could ask?
Rowan, this is Kelly. My colleague Lisa Logan, who's on the broader committee and is assigned to the outreach subcommittee. She and I have had conversations about this before, and I know that she has both sort of broad information about it, but also probably a position on what the preferred way to speak about and to ask about and to inquire about these are on our campus. So I'd be happy to ask her if she would weigh in on wherever we're at this point.
If you could ask them, that would be absolutely great. I do recognize that sometimes there's a little bit of variance campus by campus too. So
Sure.
Belle, I don't know if you want to ask it. Reed tends to be kind of on the cutting edge of, this kind of thing,
Yeah.
just because of the environment that it is.
The thing is that I don't really feel like right now Reed has a really good like trans
Okay.
club thing.
Okay.
There were some, but now because people graduating, they're kind of collapsing and on the like period of rebuilding. But I personally do have many transgender friends at Reed, so I can probably just like ask them if people think that's okay. And obviously I have, because I only have like a very small sample size that I can reach personally, so that wouldn't be very representative for all the like trans people's mindset at Reed College, but I think they can probably represent like one or two kinds of it. So basically what you guys want to know is just like here are like two different ways of asking about gender and which way trans people would prefer, right?
Well, or do either of these catch your identity, or would you prefer us to ask in a different way, maybe?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry.
Got you.
Sorry, Rudy Ann, sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's okay. I just want to appreciate and echo what you mentioned in regards to reaching out and incorporating that. Two things to note. So as the HEC, our research and data team, we work connected to our public institutions, right? And so I really appreciate bringing up, Reed even, in our private institutions, because their data we don't necessarily collect. And so, but the alignment is pretty similar in that. The other thing I just want to celebrate and echo is in what Rowan and folks are saying is that the approach the HEC is trying to take as far as data collection is really through that data equity lens and considerations and process, where it does have a key component in asking the people we're talking about for their opinion, right? And what they think we should do. So as long as we're staying in that vein and just doing right by that, I think we're just moving in the right direction. So I just wanted to lift that into space and clarify that.
Okay. Caroline and Lindsay, and thank you for that, Rudy Ann. Caroline and Lindsay, you both represent different schools as well. Do you feel like you would be comfortable? Are there groups on your campuses that you feel like you could present this to and say, do these capture how you would want your identity, or how you would want to notate your identity? Is there a way we can do this better?
Yeah, so actually my job at OSU, we work really closely with our Pride Center here. So I'm happy to connect with the center director and see the best way to maybe get some student perspectives on this. So that's absolutely something I can reach out about.
And likewise, I actually reached out to our coordinators of our career resource centers, and unfortunately I have not heard back, but I'm going to just circle back to them. And I've already touched base with our director of our career resource centers just to say, hey, do you mind if I ask your staff this? So I'm just going to follow up. I know everyone's really busy right now, just to see if anyone does want to weigh in. I provided them with the original list. I'm updating it to kind of what we have here to say, hey, is there any other, do you have any recommendations of how we can make this more inclusive, if that works? So I'll hopefully be able to share more in the near future.
Okay. Can we ask that you all have feedback by next meeting so that we can certainly decide this question for once and all and move on? I think it's worth spending as much time as we've been spending on it, but it would be great to kind of get it wrapped up. Great, thank you. Okay, good. The next one I wanted to move on to, because I think this one was okay, so we made some changes with race, ethnicity, national origin. And I have things low. I rearranged them so that they're in alphabetical order because I wasn't sure, that just seemed to be the best way to do that. So does anyone have any comments on that? Does anyone want to change anything there? Belle?
Sorry. Kelly, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Just like one very little thing. It's Southeast Asia American, not Southeast American. I
Oops.
believe these two terms are very different things.
Good point. Okay, thank you.
Rowan, I was just going to ask, since I can't see the list, is it short enough for you to just quickly read it, or should I just review it when I get back to my computer and share any thoughts I might have?
I think it might be clearer if you read it yourself. It's fairly long, and it's fairly, it's kind of extensive. Yeah.
No problem.
Thanks.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Rudy Ann, is there? Wondering if you have any input on that one.
Sorry, on which one?
Sorry, we're back to the shared screen. You should be seeing race, ethnicity, and national origin.
And I see that. Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were asking about a particular group.
Right. Yeah. No, we had expanded that. We had expanded the list, I think, at our last meeting, and this is what we came up with. And I'm wondering if that feels comprehensive. Does that feel too granular? Think about not just people. I mean, it has to be people filling out the identity. We want them to feel comfortable with as many as they want. So we want to make sure there are enough options there. But we also don't want to get to the point where people are like, I don't know which one to choose because I'm not sure which one applies to me.
Right. I think the only thing I see, still missing, is there a reason why we're not including the white category?
We have European or European American, but we could make that.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we could make that white, European, or European American, but maybe just white would be better because not all European people necessarily identify as.
Right. Yeah. So, and this is where, like I said, I'm thinking when we use it, right? And so our data definitely has white as a category. And then you're absolutely right. Not all European Americans are white.
Right.
So maybe editing that, but I see everything else. It looks spot on as far as, like I said, how the state is using the demographics.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. All right. So Kelly, if you could take a look at that when you get a chance, but no other changes. So maybe we can accept it without any other changes if that feels good to people. And then the economic status, I know, Belle, you had mentioned the parents' income, and I'm not sure that's going to be really useful for us in this setting. So we did add a couple of questions there. Within the last month, have you worried about not having enough money to make rent, missed at least one meal because you did not have money or food or money to get food, worried about not having enough money for school-related expenses such as tuition or books, missed class or work because you did not have money for transportation? And then, are you concerned that your current financial situation, this is another question, are you concerned that your current financial situation will impact your ability to stay in school? And the options there were yes, no, sometimes, and prefer not to answer. Do those questions, so that gives us 5 questions about economic status. Does that feel like too many? Does that feel like that's going to be useful in helping to kind of identify where people are at? Is that too much?
Rowan, and I apologize to everybody for not being at the discussion where this started last time, but that strikes me just on the face of it as being too many, especially when we think about how big the survey is potentially going to be overall. As you were listing those things, those 5 possibilities, I was asking myself, do I expect us to understand anything differently about people based on each one of these responses? And I kind of feel like the last question, the most general one that simply says, is this a worry for you, regardless of whether it's about books, whether it's about food, or whether it's about rent? I wonder if maybe we shouldn't just go with that one general idea so that it can be clearly communicated without asking people to expend the emotional energy. It's a thought. I don't feel super strong about it yet, but as you were reading them, my thought was, do we need all of these? It does feel like too many.
Yeah. So could we maybe, what if we just boiled it down to two, because I think two might be plenty for this category. Which two do people feel would most contribute to, so thinking about students who are answering this are going to be, we're trying to get information about this question because we want to know if people of certain economic statuses are more at risk for violence, and if they feel differently about their access to resources. So for example, we might find that people who are not worried about making ends meet have better access to resources. So we would recognize that people who have fewer resources or people who don't have as much money don't have as much access to resources to support them if they experience sexual misconduct. We might also recognize that people who are, there might not be any difference. And so we might be able to say that it doesn't matter what someone's economic situation is. That's not a factor in whether or not they're at risk for sexual violence. And that's really important when we're thinking about prevention and intervention strategies.
I would say if we're gonna think about two, I'm happy to jump in. And I was thinking that the one that's focused on where you live, and then the last question focusing on if your current financial situation could impact your ability to stay in school. For me, those feel like the two that will give us the most information. Similarly, depending on your housing situation, we know that that could be another data point around someone's experiences with violence based on where they're able to reside and if it's a safe space versus not a safe space. So I'll start the conversation and put that out there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe we can look at ones we can get rid of. The one that says within the last month, have you, that was the one I thought that we could probably slash out. Um, I was just thinking that this is one that I thought that probably wouldn't help us that much. Do we have to ask about their Pell status?
No, we do not. We don't have to ask any of the, we have to ask about their
Oh,
economic status, but not any specific question.
okay. What does knowing their Pell status, what does that help us gain insight about?
I think it's mostly low family income because you have
Low
that
family income. Okay.
there's an income threshold for Pell Grants.
Okay, so that kind of gets us to their family income already. Okay. Then if we, between the Pell one and the second one, asking about your financial situation and whether you get support, which is also kind of asking about the family situation, and if you have any kind of financial support and what's going on with your family, which of those two would be stronger? Or do we need to choose between the two?
I'll just note that there are folks who are responsible for their financial education, but they still have plenty of money, right? Like, so I'm not sure if we'll actually, based on uh, who's paying for college, that might not really give us what we need to know around what their
Okay.
financial situation is.
Okay, so we can.
Did the discussion last time consider sort of framing these as sort of a sliding scale rather than sort of specific response options? Meaning, it sounds like we're interested in two different indicators of instability. One is how hard is it for you to pay for education, and the other is how hard is it for you to meet the basic needs of both your survival and anybody who depends on you, so rent, food, and all those things. What if we give it any consideration yet to sort of framing these as, on a scale of 1 to 7 or 1 to 9, how often or how regularly do you have to, or are you stressed about your ability to meet the financial needs that you have for staying in school versus the financial needs that you have for meeting your and your family dependents? I mean, I wish I were sitting in a place where I could write this out and sort of make it a little easier to think about. But have we thought about sort of framing it that way, just asking people to think about it as a, how often do you feel at risk, or how intense is the anxiety or uncertainty about your situation? And use, I mean, I don't think that's a perfect measure, but it might be a way of getting at sort of several different possibilities that all point, several different reasons why somebody would feel financially insecure or financially uncertain, whether it's because they don't have support from family or because they don't have loans or whatever. I mean, just a thought.
So if we use the Pell Grant one for proxy for low income, that gives us information that I think is important. If we use the housing one, that gives us information not necessarily about economic status, but certainly about risk factors, right? Is someone living on campus or off campus? So I feel like it's important to include that. And I feel like this makes sense to put it here. To Kelly's point, if we change the last question, are you concerned that your current financial situation will impact your ability to stay in school, to do you know how strongly do you agree or disagree with the following statement? I am concerned that my current financial situation will impact my ability to stay in school, and then make that like a strongly agree, not a problem, disagreed, strongly disagree.
I think I do like Kelly's idea of using Likert skill here. I feel like maybe for the very last question, I mean, given Rowan said that we asked for the Pell Grant and we asked for current housing status are kind of like pretty critical. I feel like the last question can expand to, based on Kelly's idea, how like are you like how much you have the anxiety where you feel worried that your current financial situation will impact your ability to stay in school. A Likert scale from 1 to 7, from I strongly disagree to I strongly agree. And then next question, sorry if it's adding more question, how like are you concerned that your current financial situation will impact your ability to meet your own basic needs, such as food, having a place to sleep, and if you have any person that needs to depend on you, impact like their life. Or we can just combine these two together, like your ability to stay in school and meet your basic need, and your dependent's basic need, and a Likert scale from 1 to 7.
So that's two or three separate questions there, Bill. I'm not sure. I think asking about your current financial ability impacting your ability to stay in school is of those three, I think that one's probably going to get us closest. And if we change that to one thing that I'm going to bring up in another section, if we have time to talk about it, is trying to keep the same set of options as choices for each question. So going, a Likert scale that's not necessarily 1 to 7, but that strongly agree to strongly disagree. If we do that, and then we could say something like, please indicate your agreement with the following statement. I am not concerned that my current financial situation will allow me to stay in school, or something like that. Frame it as a positive rather than a negative. I think it's easier to respond to a positive statement than a negative. That gets confusing. So if we for example, if we did something like, please agree with the following statement. I am not worried. My current financial I am certain, or something like, I am confident that, if we did something like that, I am confident that my current financial situation will allow me to stay in school. And then
you
ask
put that as a level of agreement.
Right.
I think I like that language you suggested there, Rowan, about using a word like confidence, because then methodologically I completely agree with your goal to keep the response categories as close to the same as possible. throughout the survey. That saves people time and energy, emotional energy, as they're thinking about it. But it also risks sort of neutralizing what you really want to get at. So I like the idea of putting that emotion of anxiety or whatever into the language of the statement. So confidence, I think, in that instance, is a really good way to frame it. So I'm just expressing agreement with that. And I do think that people would then understand sort of confidence as indicating sort of anxiety or uncertainty when they think about, do I agree with this or not, right? So I think that's a good starting point for framing a question like that.
Okay.
I think it looks nice that cut down on the questions in this section.
Can I also just throw in that at this point, the question about Pell and the question about housing are direct and straightforward and pretty simple to answer. So I think having 4 or even 5 questions here is now somewhat less concerning than where we started, right? Because I think more questions is fine as long as they're easy to answer, quick and easy to answer. Don't take a ton of thought to solve. So I think we're in a good spot now.
Okay. So that leaves us with 3 questions. Any other thoughts on that? Awesome. Cool. Okay, great. All right. Now, immigration status. This one's going to be fun. So Belle was kind enough to put a ton of different options in for us. We are not sure that this gives us that we really get more information here, but I'm wondering which of the options we feel should be well. And Rudy Ann, you had mentioned, why are we asking about this? Because because we have students who are from all over the place, right? Some of them are people who are here on student visas, some who are here, DACA or without other citizenship documentation. That affects risk groups. And so the confidentiality of this information is really tricky, right? We're asking really sensitive information. We're asking, have you ever been sexually assaulted, right? So that kind of confidentiality will apply to all of this information. The schools are responsible for making sure that it is confidential. But we do not necessarily, well, no, we do have to ask about immigration status, but we can keep it very simple. And we can ask any question we want. We just need to have some kind of a question in there about immigration status.
I have a question. Can we combine these? So after, are you currently a U.S. citizen?
Mm-hmm.
If the answer is no, then maybe it could be a please mark all that apply.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say U.S. visa. And then they just, instead of having it in separate questions, we just then a green card, DACA recipient, and then just add it all in one so people can just click it. That's just one idea to shorten it, but still ask the questions.
I like that idea, actually. Thank you.
Okay. And if no,
Rowan, did you say that we have to ask this question? I mean, is that part of the law that was passed that does require that we inquire about this? I mean, I totally agree that this is an at-risk group, but I don't want to be alarmist or anything, but I mean, just the current political reality in this country makes me not want to have this recorded anywhere simply for the safety of we can be confidential. I know all of our confidential rules and the steps we take at Willamette and all this, but I just still have this shadowy concern in my head that we may be headed towards a government that tries to say, you're going to tell us who these people are. And even if it's not directly indicated, we have forensic computer people who can identify who said what or something. I realize that's way out there, but I don't know. I guess I'm just expressing that as a concern. And that's not helping us with how to frame the question, but
Yeah, Kelly.
I totally am
Yeah.
smiling. You can't see me because you're on your phone, but I'm smiling with Rowan because that was literally my voice concern this morning, just as this was fresh in my head. You're absolutely right. And you're not making this more than it is. The concern, especially, around DEI topics and stuff to serve underrepresented communities. Me being a former English language teacher and just high school teacher and advocate for students of other places, this one always concerns me, and only because it ebbs and flows for sure on how the data gets accessed. And the unfortunate part too is that in my career I have seen how data has been taken and misused and used for evil and to persecute. I mean, we've had these conversations too at the enterprise level for the state with other agencies when we think about data sharing, and but we always end up landing on the protection of the information and it landing in the wrong hands. And like you, I don't know how to completely mitigate that, other than really setting the tone of the document for students and folks to access and really recognize, how this is going to be used and for what intent. But I still err on on a cautious approach in that if it's required, fine, but maybe we don't have to ask so much, right? But I don't know what the other solution is, considering the fact that, like I said, it's kind of everywhere with all these sensitive topics and questions. So how can we do our best to support that protection, knowing what we know? But for sure, I agree that the climate is just not helping right now. And knowing the communities and the families that I interact with, people are really afraid and they don't trust the system. It's just never been that way. And so how can we do our best to support it, I guess, is what I lift up in the space as we engage in this particular question. It's just us knowing that we don't have full control of an outcome necessarily, but if we can proactively think through that, I know I'd feel a little bit better.
So I would argue that the same is true for trans folk, that they have the same concerns, if not more, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I totally validate those concerns. I think they're really real, and I think we're all feeling. I just want to give everybody a cup of tea, and we'll all take a deep breath. It's gonna be a rough couple of weeks. We're gonna get through it. Just turn off the freaking news. It's not gonna help. There's my little editorial for that, but. Yeah, so I think adding in those prefer not to answers, and then remember, we can also have introductory text that says, in front of this question saying, we recognize that many people may not feel comfortable answering these questions for a lot of different reasons. Please recognize that you can, you do not have to answer any question in this survey, and you can continue on if you want to. We'll have something like that, and we'll have that for a lot of the different questions, I think. I just realized something else because I'm looking literally at the statute. It asks about national origin too, which is going to be really fun, right? So we do need to add a question that says, what country were you born in, or something like that. And the same thing will be true. I'm just going to leave that. I think we should just have that one open text.
Yeah, then, I would agree, and I also would say, Rowan, that language of what country were you born in does not necessarily get at. Both of my children were born in Mexico, but because I'm their father, they were born as dual citizens, and so that I'm not criticizing the starting point of the question. I'm just saying that even that sort of straightforward language has the potential to be confusing, right? So we need to think that one through. If that's a requirement, we need to think through exactly what it is. What's the motive of that requirement, and therefore how do we ask this question so that we actually get the right information? But
right.
Anyway.
So again, the motive for the requirement is demographic information that could be used to identify at-risk groups, including but not limited to sex, race, ethnicity, national origin, economic status, disability status, gender identity, immigration status, and sexual orientation. So we do need to ask those questions. the national origin, like, does that mean the country you were born in, or does that mean where your people are from? What does national origin mean?
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, it's so much of it is about it's about the identity that you associate with that piece of information about you, right? I mean,
So, okay, so
I'm not sure what the answer is.
Yeah, we're at a point where we're doing rules writing for this. So we could say rules writing, in rules, we could say by national origin, we mean ethnicity or something like that. We could say that, but we can also, so we can define it however you want, but we do need to have something in there. How would people feel most comfortable asking about national origin?
I personally think asking the country that you were born in might not be very informative, if that makes sense, because I feel like it depends on what we actually want to know based on that, right? Like if we were already asked about their immigration status, I think maybe here we want to know about the cultural thing, like what like your own identity, like how you identify, like which like who are you, who are your people, what kind of culture that you identify yourself with. I'm thinking maybe if we interpret national origin like that, it would be more helpful and less offensive, because in the US there are a lot of people live here for almost their whole life, but they were born in a different country, but it doesn't necessarily means that they do like identify like the people in that country more as their people instead of identify people in the US as their people, right?
So scrolling back up, I had it written as race, ethnicity, national origin. Do you feel like that's comprehensive enough to catch that idea of national origin? Do we need another question, or is that going to be comprehensive enough?
I think it's comprehensive enough. Put that out
Yeah,
there.
I would agree. I would agree with that. It kind of goes against sort of survey logic, in that it really poses potentially three different questions to people that they can only answer with one response. But I also think that given some of our concerns about this kind of information, that may be a feature, not a bug, of a question like that, right? So that people can interpret it however they want and answer it in a way that's meaningful to them, but which doesn't actually force them to answer it three separate ways or three different times or something like that. So I think at the moment, my inclination, Rowan, is to say, yeah, that sounds good enough to me. Maybe we don't need a new question for it.
One thing I'd like to add about the immigration status, I would kind of to add on to what you were saying, Rowan, about giving some of the, what we say before the question. I'd love to really, and maybe in several of these questions, make sure we're also saying why we think this is important in the topic of sexual misconduct. Like we recognize that folks with folks' immigration status can impact their experiences with violence. We honor
And
that
their
you might not want
response
to
to
answer this.
their
Yeah.
experience in response to violence. Yeah, so yeah, I do believe having some kind of understanding or saying something before you take the survey questions, the reason why you're kind of answering that, asking that question, and why it's important, and why your voice needs to be heard, and why your identity needs to be heard.
Okay, so why we're asking about it. I think that's really, really helpful too. Yeah. Okay. So, so are we comfortable with, and then I think I don't know, I'm just going to keep that at immigration status. I'm not going to change it to citizenship because we don't really care about their citizenship. We just want to know, do they feel secure where they are, or is there, are they, I guess. So do we feel like that question, are you currently a US citizen? Yes, no, prefer to answer. And if no, do you have any of the following? Please mark all that apply: US visa, any type, green card, DACA recipient, prefer not to answer. Does that give us enough options if we think about including that prefatory language?
There's a few more down below the list you crossed out that were listed as separate questions that you might just
Oh, right.
be my only other, yeah, those ones.
Yeah.
That I would maybe just consider moving up. That was my only.
Okay. Yeah, I asked about, I changed it. So we've got green card holder and then we've got DACA or recipient, or we could put asylum or refugee status in. Would that? Okay. How do I say that? Is that right? Asylum, refugee status, or is there another way to say that?
I'm not sure. I don't have an answer. I will note though, if someone doesn't have any of these and they just don't have legal documentation, I don't know that that's captured here. I also want to honor the conversation we've had around to out oneself very specifically in that way, and I'm not sure if there's a way. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so I added none of the above. So now we've got if you are not currently if you answered no, you're not currently a U.S. citizen. Do you have any of the following? Please mark all that apply: U.S. visa, any type, green card, DACA recipient, asylum refugee status. None of the above. Prefer not to answer.
Can I ask something? Instead of doing the skip logic, could you just put this in one thing? Just like, what is your citizenship status? Please mark what's apply and just put US citizen and then all the other options. Could that just be one question, or you would like to keep it as yes, no, have them to say no, and then
I'm going to leave that to the researchers, which would be easier for analysis.
okay. At least we'll get
I
no.
kind of like that idea as a protection for anybody who would say I don't want to answer.
Yeah, at least you know no. So okay, yeah, at least you'll know
I
no.
think, but I'm also, you're also right, bro. And like analytically, I want to think about this. Does that make it harder to? How reliably can you separate out all of the yes, I'm a citizen checkboxes? I'm not sure, but I think we should consider this. I like that it creates a layer of ambiguity about why somebody might not answer the question. If both of those questions exist within one space, it creates a bit more space for the I don't want to answer this people.
Well, and then that raises the question, does asking about US visa, green card, et cetera, does that give us any useful information? Does it give us more useful information than just asking, are you currently a US citizen? Considering how many numbers, right? Because remember, we have a lot of small campuses as well as the really large campuses. We could, and for the small campuses, like, under 1,400 students or whatever, this is going to be a really tricky question, right? Because there are going to be fewer people who are US citizens, more likely that you'd be able to figure out who those folks are based on their responses. We could have that as an optional question. So we could say, you have to ask, are you currently a US citizen? Yes, no, prefer to answer. And then an optional question for campuses with more than 2,500 students. And we could have then, or if you have more than 2,500 students, you can ask this question if you want to.
I think I like that.
I like that strategically, but I'm not sure that everybody would agree that we have a good reason to do that. I mean, I think we do, but I think, the small cell count problem is one that we definitely have to be aware of here, but that kind of comes later and once we've got all the responses. There's a part of me that doesn't like acknowledging this, but the reality is that I think someone who has a green card or a visa probably has more cultural capital, maybe more resources. There's a bunch of ways in which I think their risk, zipping back to 20 minutes ago when we were talking about how finances and resources affect risk, they may have less risk than somebody who isn't here with one of those statuses. So I mean, I think that if we're required to ask it, it has real potential meaning to draw those distinctions. I wish we didn't have to, because, I don't know. I'm just answering your question, Rowan, of like, is there a difference? I think there probably is, at least broadly, in a couple of these broad categories of not U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's a really good point. Kelly, just to add to that, when we get into the implementation recommendations that we're going to be making, we need to be talking about cell size for the colleges and universities. So that we will need to talk about that before they get the survey even. So before this is really hard, right? Because we need to think about what the analysis is going to be like when we don't have any idea what kind of data they're going to be getting back. The other thing is we're going to be running this through, hopefully we're going to have an opportunity to pilot this with diverse groups of students, and we can get some feedback from them as well. So why don't we table the deciding on this, people think about it, maybe talk to folks on their campuses and see, you know, how would you feel about this? Remember that we have some schools that have just a couple hundred students, as well as some schools that have, you know, multiple thousands. So we can choose different questions to be asked depending on the campus. That's entirely up to the council, right? But we do need to have at least the one question in there. That sound okay for folks? Okay, all right. So we'll table the people will think about the U.S. or about the immigration status question. We will come back to that, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. It's 9:52. And I apologize for talking so much this time, but one thing that I wanted to run by you all is it is now the beginning of November. Theoretically, you know, I mean, we're there, right? It's the beginning of November. To keep us on track so that we have a draft that we can share in hopefully January with the full council, I wanted to make a suggestion that you all focus on section A, which is the number of type of incidents, both reported and unreported, of sexual misconduct. All right, because we still don't have definitions that everybody's agreed on and what sexual misconduct means. We need that, right? But I was going to suggest that you focus on that section, which talks about the number of incidents, the when, where, and who. So that's A through D. And then let me draft the rest of the questions for your approval and run them through you like we did this. I think that might be a little bit faster, and it allows you to focus on the most sensitive questions. Does that sound okay with folks?
That sounds great. And we're still following that particular, we can look at the particular survey that we decided and see how they did that section comparably A through D and adjust it from there.
I would agree, Rowan, as long as that's a reasonable ask on your time within your job description, then I think that would save us a ton of time, and that would be greatly appreciated. I feel totally fine moving in that direction as long as that's fair and reasonable for you.
Yeah, I can totally handle that. And like I said, I will run all of the questions through you, but I'll at least run the first pass through them. And then next meeting, we can make the couple of decisions we talked about today, and then you can start maybe really drilling down on getting working with the language committee to make sure you've got definitions in place. Yeah, I think that'll help us move forward. If that's okay. Awesome.
Can I reiterate? So for the next meeting, then we're going to be, are we starting with section A then? And then where are we at with the language committee? I feel like we wanted to give it to them because I feel like there was a little duplication happening between the two committees. So then we're just waiting for them to give us some things, right?
I feel like you need to talk with them. I feel like you need to have a joint meeting and get those definitions hammered out. So maybe the next meeting that you have is that joint meeting where you're like, okay, we're going to maybe the agenda for the next meeting is we are going to define what we mean, what we're going to be talking about, and then start writing questions A through D. Caroline, you came back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. I moved my mouth.
Okay, so I was just saying, I guess maybe a decision for you is to think about making sure that your next meeting is a joint meeting with the language committee, getting your definitions agreed upon, and then starting to write your questions for A through D.
Okay. Does everyone agree that our next meeting, we can aim to have it with that committee for scheduling purposes?
That's fine with me. I don't object.
I'm fine with it as well. Second.
Okay, thanks everyone. And then if we all can start by reviewing section A.
Yeah, I think A through D, because it's all kind of, those will all be sort of mixed together.
Okay. And do we want to do similarly to what we did before, which is we started a document and everyone took turns essentially downloading and then uploading? Does that sound like that would be a good way to kind of approach A through D, just like we did with the demographics? Making sure we're all on the same page and seeing what we can have done before our next meeting, recognizing that meeting will be also focused on language or definitions.
I agree. Just have a core set of questions and start playing with it and adjusting it. And yeah. And we already have kind of the questions. Maybe we can pull out the questions from that survey that we agreed that we were going to look at, and whether those kind of get at the A through D sections, and just pull those out as the standard starting point.
Okay. Is anyone in a position to take lead on developing and creating that first document that we then start working off of? I'll know I'm in a bananas position with a big training I'm doing next week, so I wouldn't be able to touch this until the end of next week.
I can start it and upload it and let you all know when I've got it in there. Okay, all right.
Thank you so much, Rowan.
I was going to do it, Rowan, but thank you.
If you have time in between boxes.
Yes.
But I'm getting paid to do this, Adea, so it's up to you. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Rowan. You're so kind.
Okay, anything else we want to discuss at this meeting, or are we ready to adjourn?
I'm ready to adjourn. I got a meeting in 2 minutes. I got another one. So I'm gonna have to go. It was good talking to everyone, seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Thank y'all.